trying to imagine what was needed, but it really makes a big difference to have even, a handful more voices in helping to decide on the next steps, because this needs to keep going forward.
Yep.
So, and the wisdom in the room is amazing. So
yeah, and I think that we're already starting to talk about the idea of a stewardship team, or I really like that Claire and I have been the co-conveners, and we've really enjoyed helping hold the vision and container. And now we do want to start to open that up. I think we intentionally use this term scaffolding team for our early organizing, with this idea that it's an external support, which is temporary, and that it helps the thing grow from within. And then when the thing grows from within, the scaffolding can actually be removed. So that's all just to say that now you guys can help us grow a bigger scaffolding team. But with that, I'll just actually like to start. I'm just going to read a short little introduction, which is very similar to what I've already presented and shared. And then we can kind of open it up for just a kind of a group dialogue. And then at 6, we can either decide to do breakout rooms, or if we just have a small group of us, we can also stay as one conversation. So firstly, everybody, welcome, and thank you everyone who participated in our Cascadia Bioregional Activation Tour, October 1st through 30th, and then who joined our Cascadia Summit and Festival of What Works for the first weekend, which was last weekend, November 3rd through 5th. The purpose of these first events has been to help us showcase and identify regenerative projects happening throughout the Cascadia bioregion, and then to create a space where we could come together, meet, and learn from each other across watersheds and scales. Now, the focus of tonight and the second weekend shifts a little bit, and we want the focus to be on creating a space where, again, we can come together and meet and talk to each other in our own watersheds. And then followed by a one-day unconference happening this Saturday from 9 to 5, where we will explore topics and focus areas in which, again, we want to meet each other and allow growth across scales, not just where we live. However, for tonight, we want to create space for people who are interested in being active in their own watershed or as a watershed organizer. We will start with a quick round of introductions and see who is in the room. At 6, we can shift either into a larger conversation or into breakout rooms, depending on what people would like to see and how many people there are, and create as many locations that make sense. I think it would also be nice that if we do breakout rooms, we can also have a room for people who are trying to start a group or a team in a new place that the activation tour didn't go through, or if there's like a few people here, and that we can kind of meet to talk about strategies that they could employ as well. For each group or team or the people here tonight, some of the themes that we'd like to explore are who is present, what were the activities that happened in each area, the impact, what are you excited about, what are you fearful for, what are lessons that we can incorporate moving forward, who are the other groups and other interests that you might want to connect with and go visit. How about the other watershed teams? I think one of the most exciting things that's already started to happen is that as we get to see each other, now we can actually go connect in person. So it would be really wonderful to think about exchanges across landscapes. So I heard Rose talking about how she might go to Victoria, and Sue on Vashon is connecting with Faye on Gabriola. And what's really fun is more than even just Zoom conversations, like we can actually go visit each other and host people and share people and have coffee. So I think also just having those conversations and thinking about things like that we might want to see. And then I think it would be really nice to actually get a little bit more specific into focus. And it would be really wonderful to see if there are people in each area who would like to be a part of an organizing team. If there are, what do you need? What would you like to see from a website? That's going to be a really big, important question. Right now, we have one Regenerate Cascadia website, but we're already thinking about this idea of an organizer's DNA. And that's kind of the principles, the ethics, the values that can really pull us together, but also allow for a level of subsidiarity and then autonomous self-organizing. So what does a Regenerate Bellingham group look like? What does a Regenerate Seattle group look like? And then what would you need? What would be the activities that you would want to host and really explore? And already we've had like a lot of really cool ideas. Claire has talked about the idea of coming together to share bioregional updates on a regular schedule. So updates of what's happening in a watershed. Sue has been exploring weaving together the projects on Vashon to be able to share a presentation about Vashon, and then using that weaving as an opportunity also to connect with regenerative projects and help kind of invite them into this process as well. So I think that idea of the story of a place, the bioregional learning and exchanges, as well as the regenerative movement mapping. And then I think there's always that component of the governance and funding, which is really important too, of how do we come together to make decisions? How do we get people and projects in areas resourced to do the work that they're doing and that they need? So with all of that said, we want this to be a start of conversation, a start of coming together to meet each other face to face and to build these networks of trust in which we can support each other in the work that our world needs. Yeah, and with that, I'll just end with the quote that I opened the summit with on Friday, which is a quote from Lansing Scott that he wrote in the 1988 Cascadia Bioregional Proceedings in the introduction called Welcome Home. And in it, he just said that a growing number of people are recognizing that to secure the clean air, water, and food that we need to survive healthfully, we have to become guardians of the places where we live. People sense the loss in not knowing our neighbors and natural surroundings, and are discovering that the best way to take care of ourselves is to go out and take action for ourselves. When we define our places using the earth as the frame of reference, taking into account flora, fauna, landforms, climate, and so on, we are talking in terms of bioregions. Can we move from our status of internal colony of the American and Canadian industrial system used for resource extraction, technology services, and holiday vacationing to a more self-reliant and self-determining bioregional community? Can we gain greater control of our common destiny? Can we? Perhaps. But it all depends. It depends on what we do and how we do it. The challenge of change is great. Without a clearly articulated collective vision for what we want to do and coordinated strategies for how to move forward, our ability to effect deep and widespread change is stymied. Is there a way to create a greater connective tissue between various parts of our movements for change so that we can strengthen and nourish one another? Can we interject a clear and comprehensive agenda for change into the stale debate that passes for politics these days? These are the questions and challenges that we must face. And it is in that hope that we have gathered over the past month and here tonight, not as an answer to this debate, but hopefully to open up a conversation. It is up to Cascadians, each in their own way, to create and promote these changes and lead the way forward rather than wait for someone else to do it for us. So with that, yeah, thank you everybody for being here. And I'd like to turn it over to Claire if she has any thoughts, and then we can open it up to everybody. Claire, you are muted.
So yeah, really starting to kind of think about next steps of how we start to organize together. And one of the ways that has often struck me as really relevant to when we're thinking about what are the resources we need to do whatever it is that we're dreaming about. Once we start to have to think about what are those resources, it really starts to kind of focus how we're thinking about the details of what we're going to do. And so, but there's always kind of this piece of you've got to be really clear of the vision that you want, and then also what it is that you're needing. And so I'm really hoping that the questions that we're going to ask are going to help us start going into that direction. Especially as we start to put some budget considerations together of what we're going to be looking for funding for. But it's resources are way more than the money. It's what are the things we need to do that work. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's what I have to offer right now. It's also really thinking about being clear about the role for Regenerate Cascadia in supporting this work, and then the role of watershed organizing groups, and what that can look like. So sort of, we know that as we came into many of the communities that we did, people are really stretched on the ground. The work that they're already doing is sort of often, they're working pretty hard. So to take on doing more was actually a huge stretch for a lot of people. And so what can we do with what we have right now? How can we increase that capacity? And what are the steps that are really going to kind of help create the conditions for being able to expand out towards where we want to go? So we're really thinking about two different layers: the local organizing groups, and really wanting to respect the principle of subsidiarity, which means that, if you're not familiar with that principle, it's that the lowest level of decision making is where the decisions should be made. And if it can't be made at that level, it should move up a level. And so it's really about validation, ensuring that people have a sense of agency, and what needs to happen in order for that to occur. And then for Regenerate Cascadia, there's a bunch of things that we can do that are at a more centralized and administrative scale to support the work that is happening in all of the communities. And how can we help weave the learning that so that we're all have access to the learning that is going on. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say right now. Maybe something else that comes to mind. And I'm wondering if there are questions that have come up, and that Doris, I see your hand is up.
Hi, everybody. Well, I keep thinking about these things. I'm very inspired by what we've done already, and who's at the table. I don't see as many of the young people here at the moment as we've seen before, but I'm sure we'll get there. I think a lot about the bioregional education centers. I think that's got to be a really a goal sooner than later. I think a lot about how we can make a circular economy that keeps the money rolling within the region and not seeing so much money leave. I was a fair trade activist during the WTO stuff that happened in Seattle, and finished a graduate degree in 2006 at the UW. So I had an amazing late in life career, and studied globalization and neoliberalism, but I've also been a grower of food. I helped start a food bank farm, and I've studied some permaculture, and I hope we keep doing these introducing ourselves sort of things, because we don't know each other very well yet. I'd really like to see us trying to develop cooperatives, and I think that's a really good work model, and it will really help people to feel like they're in a shared process. I think a lot about how we meet the basic needs of our population and create more jobs. And I think a lot about food production. We're gonna really have to work hard at figuring out ways to get more people growing food. And of course, thinking about how we rehabilitate property that hasn't been in any production. You know, we're gonna have to find all the edges that can be brought in. So I know that's a big list, that we can't do very quickly, but it's the kind of things I think about.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And just to say that, yeah, so hopefully on Saturday, that's exactly the type of work groups and sessions that we hope will come up. So definitely raise them there.
One thing I'd love to just bring in right now is that I think it would be really helpful as well to focus on the kinds of actions that are supporting the work we're doing, and what is working well, where is kind of the aliveness coming from in your communities, and what do we need more of, and stay a little less attention to the actual programs and things. Those are important, but it's just, I think sometimes that kind of locks us into a very specific domain, and it sort of right now, I think just paying attention to what is bringing the life to the work, and what is missing that needs to be there. So, and I see some nods. So, David.
Yeah, what's coming up for me is, and the reason I asked about the transcript or the opening quote from Lansing is because when I was listening to that, it sounded a lot like a kind of, or at least in the direction of a type of a vision and mission statement. And I think it's really important that that all gets clarified, both for the higher level organization of Regenerate Cascadia and at the local levels. You know, that we can't just assume that everybody that wants to be involved shares exactly the same vision and mission. And so I think that really needs to be clarified, and we need to figure out, you know, the broad brushstrokes, so to speak, that would be inclusive enough that would really, like, yeah, this is the boundary. And then each individual organizing group to have its own, I'm imagining that they could all be a little bit different, and yet have some true alignment. So I just think you know, we need to spend some time and get really clear about that kind of thing.
I love that, David. And I just want to say too that I actually think it's really amazing. I think that was the coolest thing that came out of the summit, is I feel that, like, as we have traveled and had these conversations, and people have watched the presentations and then come together in that summit to share, it just, you could feel this shared sense of context and this kind of shared purpose, and so what you're touching on, of the shared mission, vision, and also language, and so that we're not assuming that people know what we mean when we say certain words, but that we can be really clear on that. I do think is really important, because what's interesting is I feel like it keeps happening where if people haven't seen the presentations, if they haven't watched the talks, or they're coming in with a different context and they don't have that shared cohesion. So really making it cohesive. And then the only other thing I'll add to that is just we have found it really powerful to start with questions. And that's been really nice. And it's almost like the mission of the Regenerate Cascadia activation tour was, how do we regenerate Cascadia? And that's also nice because it creates that level of scalability of then, how do we regenerate Whatcom? How do we regenerate? And then the local groups can explore that. So just kind of a fun thing, but I completely agree. Brian, on to you.
Yeah, I just have to dovetail on to that. I think it's really critical that we define what is regeneration. I mean, is that pre-colonial contact? Is that like just being able to pull ourselves back from the brink of climate disaster? What is that? And each geographic region, it means different things. To different cultures, it means different things. So, but there is a commonality, like, how do we restore our landscape? How do we rebuild ecosystem services and provide for all the other needs that civilization has imposed upon it? I think as far as an organization, what the main roles, the benefits, the main roles that this Regenerate Cascadia could provide is communication between communities, providing a forum for communicating and organizing, calling out all the different organizations that are involved, their skill sets, how they want to participate, like all of these kind of things, like really spelling that out on where people are at. And then I mean, I've been involved in education for quite a long time here in Whatcom County. And you really need to meet people where they're at. So like if you talk about regenerating large landscapes, their eyes just kind of glaze over and it's like that's outside of their scope. But if you meet people where they're at, like I have a backyard, I want to make a pollinator garden or I want to grow my own food, you can meet people where they're at with information. And to do that, you also, it's really important to have demonstration sites. So identifying key demonstration sites within communities that you can point people to that have significant success stories. And then that leads to the importance of storytellers. So the storytellers need to be able to augment the demonstration sites that have successes and get that information out to the broader community, because we're facing a time where people are getting desperate. They're getting desperate financially, like the ecosystem destruction is like they see it happening everywhere. They're trying to find ways to plug in, like they want to be involved, but they don't know how. So if they see that in real life, not a YouTube, not a book reading, but in real life examples, you know, and that's what we've been trying to do here at Inspiration Farm. And it's, you know, there's a lot of traction from those kind of things. And that leads to more sites that want to do similar things. So that brings me to the other main role of Regenerate Cascadia is communication and fundraising. And with the fundraising, it goes to support the demonstration sites, the storytellers, and the what was the other thing? Educators that are willing to go out and do design consultations and mapping and all of these other things to meet people where they're at. Like, you know, grand scale projects are great, but they're not going to happen without policy change or big funding and all this stuff. But we need every little small backyard and meeting people where they're at, that they can feel empowered to do their own thing, right? Without policy or major federal, you know, funding or whatever. We need people to be empowered to do their own thing. So in this culture, it's really different than, say, cultures in India or Africa, where they have more of a commons mentality and a community mentality and a spiritual bond that pulls them out into the landscape to take care of it for the whole. Here we have this individual, this is my property, da 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 da. How do I take care of my property, but fit it into the puzzle of the whole? You know, anyway, so education, storytellers, and networking. Those are the three things where, like, if we get funding, that's where it should go. And then maybe into designers and help with design projects. You know, I get way more call for to help go design things than I have time to do. And there's a lot of worthy projects, but they don't have any money. So it's like, how do I balance that? Anyway, that's my thing. But it really, the bottom line is you have to define what regeneration is and then meet people where they're at, whether it's growing their food or planting some trees in their backyard or rehabilitating a stream that comes through their space. But not overwhelm them with huge projects.
So I think that's really wonderful. I would just like to highlight, so we're at about 6 o'clock. So it would be great to go for Mike, Phoebe, and then David. And then it would be wonderful. I think then we can shift into really focusing on what we might really like to see from a Watershed team or from a core team or from the Weavers or people who are interested in doing that in their local landscape. And at that point, we might do breakout groups and actually kind of more concretely explore what do you need and what do we need to set up. I think what Brian was just touching on around communication, mobilizing fundraising. Yeah, like, so what can we help with at the bioregional scale? And then what do we actually want to see more concretely at the watershed scale? And yeah, with that, I don't know, Claire, if you have anything, otherwise, Mike.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to hear from the others. There are things that are coming up, but I think Mike.
All right, thank you. You know, and I just wanted to sort of amplify. I'm still useless with names, but the mention of food earlier on, I know it's sort of obvious, but I just wanted to share some numbers with everybody. I mean, from 2 gardens here in Eugene, we've actually saved just under 40,000 seeds this year in the past 3 months. So I'm sharing that because I want, and I'm not saying, you know, everybody even know this, but the exponentiality of seeds is mind blowing when you really concentrate on it. I made it a task of mine this year to count all the seeds. We literally count all the seeds we harvested, and it even blew my mind. I mean, I know we've done well in the past, but you know, yeah, just that seeds is an exponential resource. You know, over these last 4 or 5 years, I've developed various systems for tracking seeds and so on. So hopefully that'll be useful and usable for more of us, you know. So that's just what I wanted to emphasize.
Phoebe.
Yeah, thank you. Claire, you were talking earlier about the degree to which people all across the tour are already so thinly stretched. And on the line of scaffolding, which Jen and you and David and others have referred to already, I would like to see us deal with the creating paid livelihoods or some other way, sustainable livelihoods for young people to be brought in structurally into our process right from the beginning. I'm not alone in this, I'm sure, but I'm already trying not to be working 16-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week. And, you know, many of us are already too busy. So a sustainable process going forward needs to figure out how to make livelihoods both attractive and viable for young people to help take us forward. I'm over 60 now. I think many of us are, you know, getting up into that demographic, and we need to address that as well as making this work either with cash or some other way of remuneration for young people so that we are not carrying the load. Many of us have started volunteer big initiatives over the years that run and run and run for a certain time and then fizzle out through burnout. So we've all, you know, we all need to learn these lessons and make sure that this doesn't happen to us. So how can we channel the funding that might be available to help employ people to really help lead this and take it forward, including those of you who have been doing this on a volunteer basis and may not be able to do that forever. Thanks.
Phoebe, I would love to just respond first of all, in Joe's, in his keynote, he made reference to there's quite a bit of work with regenerative education and youth and schools, and actually there's quite a bit of work that is going on, which will be presented at some point. But just to know that, and I think that's a really important point that you raise. The other thing, it hasn't actually been announced, but there's been a lot of turmoil that's gone on, and we'll let you know more about that. but there's a reason why a bunch of the younger people are not here right now, and it's not because they don't want to be here. So yeah, but really important point. There's a lot of mentors here, and that's a lot of wealth, and we need to connect them to the youth. And there's a whole bunch of stuff coming for that. So
thank you, Claire. That's really important to say. And, you know, with one of the big global things that I'm building, I've needed to remind myself to structure these things in right from the start to make sure that they can carry on. Thanks.
I think that component of intergenerational mentorship and then creating pathways that can help shift people and then support them in the livelihoods that we need is really important, and is definitely a really large focus. With that, I might want to shift the discussion into what breakout rooms people might like to have that are place-based. I do see like some different gatherings of like we have a lot of people here today from Bellingham and Whatcom. We have some other areas as well. And then really focus on, I think as we get into breakout rooms, and it doesn't actually need to be place-based, but maybe more, it could be focused on structures and what we would like to see from if people are organizing on a local watershed level through whether it's Regenerate Cascadia, whether it's Regenerate Vashon or whatever. Yeah, what are the important things? What are the needs? How do we weave the projects together? How do we get that support in there that people need? And we could spend a little bit of time talking about that. But I'd also like to open it up and see if other people have thoughts. And I see a lot of really nice things being said in the chat around, you know, the guiding principles, values, ethics, how we're treating each other, the mission, the vision. I also do think the questions, like what are the questions that we have, is like a really nice place that we could also start. Val, I'd love to open it up for you.
Hi, thanks, Brandon. Brandon and Claire, you are so kind. And that's something that really lights me up. When I come to a group, I want to know that people are kind and caring. And that, like Brandon, every time you say, if you can't come, don't worry, we're here for the long haul. You say these little things that sound just like a brother or an uncle, you know? And I think that's what draws me. Claire, you asked about what lights you up, and you said what lights up your community. I can't go far ahead. I can't be thinking about vision statements. I've written so many vision statements and strategic plans, and honestly, it puts my stomach in a knot to think about governance and funding and all the rest. I want to know more about relationship. And, you know, there are two people on this call who are close friends, Jan and Claire, and Larry Green, I know, is just brimming with ideas. I'm speaking to Jan and Claire. I can count on them. I've known them for quite a while, and it really makes a big difference. So, you know, for me, I taught for 31 years. I've been retired for 17. And what brings me to life is writing stories about how my life experience is reflected in the experience of forms that look very different from me. So I take photographs of things that stop me in my tracks. And it could be like the latest thing were the mushrooms. And I think about what's growing underneath and what grows underneath me that feeds my soil. So very metaphoric writing, and I love doing that. That's what I bring intuitively. So I'd really like to see gathering with some people and talking about what lights us up intuitively. And the idea of watersheds is fantastic. We have a lot of watersheds in BC, and, you know, I mean, across Cascadia. wouldn't it be incredible if there were a few people in each one, and many hands make light work. So thank you to all of you who are here. That's my bit. Thanks.
Well, Val, thank you. That's very kind. And it's lovely to hear that from you. You've been at a lot of things that we've done together. So I've put my hand up as an organizer for Victoria, and also for someone who's done this work for a long time. And one of the things when I think about this work, I think it's that it's wondering about and noticing whose voices are not in the room, which is what Phoebe was bringing up. It always, what I've noticed is that the people who can articulate themselves really well, often who have the money, who have the power and prestige, the education, are the ones that kind of get all of the oxygen in the room. And there's a lot of voices that are consistently left out, including those who don't have human voices. And and so because that's such a big deal, I think that it's really hard to do this work without doing some kind of sort of really thinking about whose voices are not represented here, who should be represented. And that sort of is, you know, just looking around and doing some mapping, and then doing some mapping about like where is the aliveness and where are we pinpointing that happening, who's doing that work, like at a landscape scale is what I'm thinking, at a watershed scale, and then where are the places where the big gaps are, where the gap is so big it's hurting the stuff that's where the aliveness is coming from, and sort of starting to strategically look at what is not getting attention, where do we need to do that. But until we've actually done that work together, I think it's really hard to start knowing where to focus our energy. And so that's one of the things. The other thing is around just the role of the relationship weavers, the people that that put that work in. And you know, I've said this in a number of places, but I've done this work for almost 30 years, and that work is not paid. And I've chosen to do other work in order to be able to fund the work of doing the weaving work. And that's not sustainable, and it's not an encouragement to our young people to do that work. And this is the critical work. So I think doing the mapping, but I think when, you know, I did research into community cultural development, looked at models all over the world to see how do you support it. The one role that always stood out to me that needed to be funded was, we called it different names, a cultural animator, weaver. I can't even remember all the names that we've called it, but it's always the person who weaves the relationships. And that it's not a money that can ever really be put into a direct economic role. And so I think that's part of the reason why it just doesn't get funded. But anyway, I wanted to bring that forward. I am just wondering, Brandon, about the process that we're going through right now. We were thinking about breakout rooms. Is that what we were?
Yeah, I mean, we really wanted to offer people an opportunity to meet with people local to them, or to start to explore with these local watershed groups. We can also follow up directly with each group later, you know, and provide the emails and go out. So it's really up to people here. I might honestly open it up to polls. If people want to stay in a big group and keep discussing like this, I think that's also okay. But it also can be very generative to break into smaller groups and have these discussions and then come back and report back to the main group. To kind of give voice to what Val had mentioned, a lot of this is very emergent. And I think one thing that both Claire and I have gotten more comfortable with is the idea of emergence and letting it emerge. And I think, you know, and I think just to touch on what you were mentioning is it really is that idea of shifting. We have such a focus on short-term gains, and this really is lifetime work and generational work. And I think when you start to shift and think about that in those terms, it's okay to move a little bit slower too sometimes. But also the big thing I think that you touched on that was really interesting was this idea of what inspires us and what lights us up intuitively, because the activation tour was very inspiring. And it was inspiring for us, and it was inspiring for people a part of it. And I think that that is so important. And I think that's what's lost in so much of traditional organizing. I occasionally will still now get onto Zoom calls with 50 different organizations working in a traditional coalition, and things that should be inspiring, but they're working within these normal frameworks. And it's just like exhausting. And the reason why I think personally I was able to keep going for 6 weeks, and I think for the 6 of us, or with Claire and Joe and Penny and Stephen, is it was a whirlwind, but it was inspiring, and it was like ups and downs, and just it was so amazing. And it is that empowerment thing of like, here's someone with 3 acres. Oh my God, look at what they're doing. Isn't that incredible? And if everybody was doing this, it would change the world, and to really see that and realize that people can have that. So I just think that also when we're talking about defining regenerative, I think that inspiration, I think that to me is actually how I've been thinking about it, is if it's regenerative work, it's inspiring and it's uplifting and it's positive. Sorry, so that's a little bit of a segue away, but I could create a couple polls and just to get opinions on what people would like to do. I think I would love to get input from how you all feel like your time would best be spent. Do you guys want to have breakout rooms? Do you not want to have breakout rooms? Yeah, I don't know. Jump in. I could create a poll.
Yeah, let's do it. David Kedder said he prefers a breakout group and a couple of people.
I'm
Well,
just
including
noticing
Claire
when
and Sam.
there's 5 of us from the Bellingham area here.
So
and I don't want to waste the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that could actually be great. Is why don't let me create a breakout room for Bellingham, and you all go start meeting, and then we can, and then if other people want to have rooms, we can continue to grow them as that. And let's say that we will come back at David. How long do you think is good for your group? How long would you like to have?
Good question. I'm guessing at least a half an hour, 45 minutes.
Good.
Well, urging that with Skagit as well, because we are quite close.
Please.
Cool. So I'm going to create our first room. So, and we'll say, well, let's give it 40 minutes. So we'll come back at 7. We'll have a report back. Feel free to use some of those guiding questions. I think we've got a lot to chew on, and that's great. So give me a second, because I am not and I will get that going. I'd love to hear what other rooms might be that other people would like to see.
Doris has a hand up. I'd love to hear what she has to say.
Well, I'm curious about how does this fit with what you're planning for tomorrow? I mean,
yeah, so for Saturday, so the things that you were bringing up, honestly, is our hope is that Saturday we can have sessions. So the Saturday unconference will be, our hope is that we'll just have 3 time windows, and then we'll sit together collectively, talk about the groups that we want to have that people are interested in. So that is things like bioregional education centers, circular economy, cooperatives, tech, bioregional mapping, community art. And then anybody who's interested in having that, and it's a similar process where it's iterative, and but it's people who want to move that issue forward, and that will be across landscape. So how can we bring community art together, for everybody interested in the Cascadia bioregion, and then also talk about if that really was a work group, what would you want to have a project come out of it be? How can we greater weave the work? What do we need to do to support it? And so that's kind of our hope for Saturday as well.
that's good to have that thought. Sounds good.
And Jan.
Well, I'm kind of making sure that people don't forget that the Upper Columbia exists and not have everything in the coast. So, but I don't have a group yet. So maybe if we're going into groups, I can join in with the Victoria group, but I just want to make sure you guys all know that Cascadia is just not on the coast.
Yeah, hold it down, Jan. Yes, pull it. Pull it. And actually,
live in the mountains.
Yeah. So one is I would love to invite people from Whatcom and Skagit. You have a room made, and then feel free to jump over to it so you guys can start talking. And then let's keep talking about other groups that we'd like to make. Because Jan, in response to your question, I think there's a couple different ways. One is feel free to join the Victoria group, but I actually think it might be interesting. A couple different interesting other groups could be island folk, Or another group though could be also people starting new groups that don't have a group yet. Because I met with Megan in that group yesterday, and I think that there's a lot that could be explored around strategies that we want to incorporate to help new groups start. And there's really cool things I think we could think of, like having a little video and then discussion questions, but that can help. What's become really important is it's really important to help set a framework and a context. Oh, I didn't create the room, so I'm sorry.
How do we get to our room?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
We can't
sorry.
move yet.
Okay, can you move now? I didn't hit the button.
I think so.
Okay. Oh, but I created for 15 minutes. Hold on, I'm doing poorly. How do I? Okay,
you-
1 sec.
Okay.
I'm closing all the rooms. They're
Oh,
closed. Okay,
I'm
now-
worried that this might leave some people out who are geographic outliers.
But we'll figure it
Like-
out.
They'll
Like
remain in
Mike
the large
will-
group and then
We'll
they can
scoop them up
figure it
when
out.
if they're left behind. We'll make sure no one's left alone.
Well, and no one's going to be automatically assigned. So what I'm doing is I'm creating the groups, and then people can manually join them. So
Yeah.
people can choose, and so I'm going to set it for 35 minutes now.
Okay.
And let's open it. Okay, so now Whatcom and
Hi.
Skagit. And Larry, are you in Skagit? Oh, I don't hear you, Larry. You're muted.
And also the San Juan Islands.
Yeah, I think so that's the interesting thing though, is that should this, oh, that's right, you're the San Juan. So see, so then what is the next group that people might want to create? So there could be like this other group. Certainly Eugene actually has a very large coalition, even if they're not here tonight. But what are some other groups that people might like to see?
Victoria.
Is
Okay.
there any obvious thematic group that is suggested to anyone?
I'll just say, Claire, so apparently if I create groups, I cannot really rename them once they're created. So why don't we use room 2 for Victoria?
Okay. Yeah, I know. I thought I just named one of the rooms Victoria and it just changed. So weirdly.
I thought I could rename it.
Brendan, I'm sorry. I started to join the Skagit and Whatcom group, and then I was listening to what Larry said, so I hesitated. I minimized the thing, and now I can't get it back. Anything you can do?
I think oh, actually I should be able to assign you, right? Like that's a thing. Give me just a moment.
Feel
here.
free
I'm
to
gonna
be autocratic.
All right.
I give you permission.
Goodbye, Phoebe.
Bye.
Kashaboom.
Whoa, the power you have.
Bellingham should be one of the.
Well, that's Whatcom. That's Whatcom and Skagit. So they have quite a large group. I would actually say, what's nice is we have a lot of people also on islands. I wonder if Vancouver Island might go with, we have Whidbey Island, we have Vashon Island. Could be a Salish Sea, I guess a Salish Sea group.
It could be Salish Sea.
And that might be nice for the size that we have.
Okay.
So does that, so.
Which group is that though?
Well.
The Salish Sea.
It might just be this group.
Okay.
Might be you, it would be.
Yeah, and
Right.
Paul, it's nice to see you here.
Everett, Everett, I look right out at Whidbey all the time, not that far away. And Island County and Snohomish County certainly go together.
Yeah, so Skagit kind of joined with Whatcom, but Paul, do you think, you could join the Whatcom Skagit group if you wanted to, it could be a San Juan's group as well.
No,
Just
this makes sense here, I think.
Okay.
Though there's overlap. I'm closely linked with Western Washington in different ways too. So that's to me, that's a regional group. Port Townsend, Iowa, Skagit, Fidalgo, San Juan's basically. So I'm just jumping in here tonight, catching up. I haven't caught up at all. I've been really busy with board issues with Soundwater Stewards, but I'm a climate scientist and I'm very interested in biochar and regenerative soils and regenerative agriculture, basically. That's been my push, among other educational aspects. And I'm passing the word along to different people.
That's a really great way to do this is maybe if everybody could just go around, just say what your focus interested in and maybe something that stood out for you, or that I'm just wondering, something that leads into what you're excited about, or where you feel the aliveness is, and what you know, but with a reference to maybe what next steps can be. So the aliveness and something that you think.
Also, Paul, if you get a chance, you should reach out with Howard, because he was doing the Colshan Carbon Trust, and his thing is all biochar. Sorry, okay, now I'm going to disappear.
Yeah, and I think he gave a talk. I think I saw the video, and I think he gave a talk at Wicca. Would be on in June. I gave a talk as well, and would be in the face of climate. Would be water in the face of climate change. He gave a talk there on biochar. They were opposing talks when I was talking, so basically about bluff issues, but anyway.
Well, Brandon, why are you leaving us, since Seattle is right close?
I was going to hide.
Why?
Because what I would like to do is I do a lot of talking, and I'm excited to hide away for a minute and let all of you talk.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, I like Claire's prompt of kind of like, what is it that most excites us to give us the energy to do this work, because it's
really like
multi-layers. So I think, you know, what is it that keeps us, what's pulling us in and keeping us going, or we assume will keep us going to do this work?
So Jan, why didn't you
Oh, I'm not quite ready yet.
after you?
Well, I see the bioregional earth regeneration movement in general as being a way for us to reconnect the separation that we've made from the earth, which I think is killing us. So it's like so this whole way of thinking and acting and relating to each other, I think has the potential to potentially heal something that is so necessary for us continuing forward. So anyway, and then seeing how that shows up in specific projects and engaging people so that they can get a feeling of excitement and feeling that they're doing something towards building the life conditions for us to continue. And to see that taking form and structure in governance and regenerative finances means that it's not just a little individual project, but it's networked together in ways that I see, especially the youth, are really needing. So that's enough for now.
Who are you going to
I'll pass it to somebody. I will pass it to Doris in Everett.
Haven't I already said an awful lot? I think sometimes in terms of what I can teach, and definitely organic growing is one of the things that I've done a lot of, food. And I'm a sustainable community steward in Snohomish County. We had a group of us start in 2010. We called ourselves Carbon Masters at first, but that confused way too many people. And I worked on community conversation circles. One was on food choices and how you might be a smaller contributor to the problem. Of course, I didn't frame it that way in the group. It was all conversational, starting out with, what are some of your favorite things to eat? You know, it was not critical of people. But and the other part was on transportation choices, 2 different ones, but nobody ever picked up on any of that. So it was a lot of nice work, but didn't go anywhere. And of course, to teach classes, there's a whole lot of organizing that has to happen, and that is not one of my strengths. I make art. All this art behind me is things that I've done. So I'd be happy to contribute art for. I saw Claire's hand move. That gets her. I don't know, that's enough for now. It's just really wonderful that we're working on this and that we're going to try hard to make a big network. I like it.
Who are you going to
call on somebody?
Yeah.
About Sue on Vashon.
All right. Hi. Yeah, and I'm for somebody who feels very attached to place, I'm also all over the place. I feel very much attached to Seattle as a city as well. I lived there. I went there because I wanted to. I lived there for 35 years, you know, in the same house, and went to school there, worked there. And the things that, and I was basically an anarchist. So my activity was, you know, how do you see how things are not single issues, but also that it's very hard to work within a system, that it really needs to be overthrown before anything can be done. So I started, and that started getting more and more overwhelming and depressing. And I found that groups that I got involved with in Seattle that were around gardening and like the Pea Patch community, where, you know, community gardening, and the Native Plant Society, just where there were opportunities to grow, to actually work with growing things, especially as I started learning more about how much impact that could have on climate change, and that there are things that people can do in a city with an urban forest. And I think the Green Seattle Partnership is working with the urban forest and how people can be involved with that. So there, and I started this sort of Wings initiative. So there are different projects like the pollinator pathway, where people get connected around habitat, and, you know, different projects, like, you know, it's always through the connectivity that it starts having impact. When I moved to Vashon, it was really incredible because all of these things actually did have impact. You know, there was a real forest here that you didn't have to keep, you know, that could be somewhat self-sustaining, as opposed to an urban forest. People have farms here where you can actually grow food and exchange food and have, you know, have sustainability, and the food stands are available. They're on the honor system. There's a community around growing food. And when people started exploring regenerative agriculture, and the land trust bought a piece of land to explore a regenerative agriculture, it became really, these are areas that are really hopeful for me. And so I really, and then I have a land project that I'm working on, and I see these as all very interconnected, but they've been very separate. They're separate worlds, and they are separate worlds. And I see an opportunity here for finding connectivity with this rural land project that is actually restoring, has the possibility of restoring a whole ecosystem and having learning center around that. But also being a place where people from an urban area can go and spend time, have, and I'm seeing, I don't know, I was so inspired by the summit. And I start seeing possibilities for Vashon to get connected with other islands in the Salish Sea. And when I saw the Gabriola Island discussions and the desire for people to get connected, you know, it's just very exciting. I don't know what next steps are. And I don't feel like any of these communities now are connected in with Regenerate Cascadia. And I'm not sure how to do that. But you know, that it just, there's so much potential that just kind of bubbled up over the weekend. So, or these last, you know, month, whatever. So I'm sorry, that was a lot and it was kind of scattered. So sorry.
That's good. Who are you going to pass it on to? I think it's Val, there's Brad, Brandon, and myself, and Mike.
Oh, I was muted. I'm sorry. So Brad Smith, yeah, I really liked your presentation on resilient communities as well. So,
Brad, are you there?
I'm here.
yeah.
I've been going like a lot of people. So I was laying down and listening, getting a little physical rest. So, yeah, there's two of us. Mike's still here. There's two of us from our the Eugene area. I don't know if we would define our area as, you know, Eugene or Willamette Valley or what. I'm not sure I saw anybody from Salem or any of the other places. I guess, are we saying here where we'd like this to go tonight, or just introducing ourselves, or
Any of the above. What excites you in order to keep you going ahead in this work?
yeah, well, you know, as somebody just said, was it Sue or something? You know, I've got a project that's kind of a subset of this project. In fact, in a meeting today, I used regenerative, you know, land stewardship, you know, health, interpersonal relationships, used it as the catch-all for, you know, although I'm calling it resilient communities, and you know, the terms. So this project is kind of a subset. It's people together on, you know, pieces of land, which I feel like are going to have to be the building blocks of the future world, because you know, I don't see the cities as being really sustainable, because we're all the evidence to me, and I don't hear this said very much. It wasn't in that other meeting, but we really don't have the materials to mine, and we're going to destroy the environment to mine enough materials to switch to a renewable. So you know, and I think that a simpler life on the land is a better life, and it's what we're going to have to do anyway. So that's what I'm working on. And I guess the main thing I'll say on that is that, you know, it's not like I'm coming up with, hey, look at this shiny new thing, you know. You know, a lot of, you know, so many of us are moving in that same direction already. So it's really exciting for me. So I guess that's what I'll say by way of introduction. As far as where to go now, I'm happy if, you know, Mike and I break out, and I'd love to get to know Mike. Mike was at, you know, we barely met each other. Wasn't at the events he was helping do this weekend, or when you guys were down here, or, you know, have the overall group discuss.
Do you and Mike want to have a breakout?
It's totally up to Mike. I will say that the you know, the question kind of has come up, and Claire and I discussed it a little bit in one of our breakouts during the weekend, is, you know, funding. And, you know, I have a scheme for how to fund my own project, but I don't think that's applicable to this project. So funding, you know, it was brought up in the chat. So that's probably more of a big group question, but that's a question that, you know, I don't have answers to, and I'm interested in exploring. So I just throw that in, that could be something we could start today, do this week, work can, but that's something I'm interested in figuring out.
It is, Brad, is the thing that's weird about the world I've inhabited for the last few years. You know, all our financial systems and many others run on the basis of scarcity. But when you really get into seeds, it's on its head. It's abundance, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my sort of challenges at the moment is figuring out how to, you know, we've touched on in one way or another tonight, the fair exchange of value, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sort of not wrestling in a bad way, but I'm trying to figure out how do we exchange value using something like seeds as an asset when it's an exponential resource, you know. It's not a scarce resource, you know, done right. So that's just my thought to share with everybody, really. And of course, seeds are at the, you know, to use some puns here in a way, seeds are at the root of the food system. I mean, that's, you know, there is no, you know, without seeds, most of the food would go away, you know, fairly quickly. So I'm biased in that regard, and I just did a little bit of just quickly a little bit of math the other day from figures that I found. So Halloween this year, it was estimated that there would be about 120 million pumpkin bought or used in the United States for Halloween, and I figured 100 seeds per pumpkin, which is very, very diminutive. You get a lot more than that. That's 12 billion seeds, the majority of which were probably wasted. You know, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm just going to say there's three of us still that need to go, and I'm just noticing the time, just needing to just be cognizant of that. Not to cut you off, it's just I was noticing that. So if there was something else to add in.
Well, I was done, so I was happy to pass it on to Mike next. So
I've said my piece. So yeah, I don't know who else is left, Claire.
Oh, Brandon's gone. Okay. Sorry, we've got time then. I just saw we had 3 left. Did you finish there, Mike?
Let me see if I'm still. Yeah, more or less. I just think it's interesting to, you know how passionate I am about this, Clay. You mentioned it before, but it's interesting how seeds are not, you know, to me they're the core of so many things, and the other side of that coin is in terms of creating a cohesive ongoing movement in Cascadia. Seeds, you know, again, I'm going to be biased, but seeds to me are a wonderful resource because everybody's planting seeds one way or another. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Who are you going to pick to go next?
Who's still there? I can't see.
Val and me.
Well, I would say, would you go next, Claire?
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, it goes back to I talked about the mapping piece. I think that there's so many people doing so much incredible work that that just starting to pay attention to who is doing the work. And one of the things that I have noticed is doing with community art projects, and I've got a few that I'm sort of thinking that would be really great to put together, and I've started talking to the people who did it. So Bryony Penn is one of the people who did the Islands of the Salish Sea Community Mapping Project, where she invited, it wasn't just, they were a team of them that invited community members to do artwork that reflected what was happening in their communities that they were drawn to. They had a specific question, but it was a way of seeing what was going on. And then those community art projects were displayed together, but it really got a conversation going. So it was a way of mapping, but through art. And there are a few different projects that I'm sort of thinking, I'm having conversations of pulling those together. So to my mind, the reason why community art can actually be so great is that it's just, it brings the community together. It reaches people who maybe don't normally get engaged in these conversations throughout the bioregional, and yet it involves them. You can really sort of catalyze some of that conversation or aspects of the conversation. So yeah, so I would say using community art would be good. Yeah, and to say that there is very little funding often for doing that kind of project when it's outside of an arts organization. Anyway, just having done that kind of work where you're trying to bring diverse groups together to work on that. Yeah, so that would, it does need support, and it's about way more than the art that's produced. It's about, once you have that, you actually need to have processes for being able to follow up on the relationships and everything that's catalyzed out of it. So it's sort of, it's thinking about the actual project and what are the next steps that need to be able to catch the balls as they start to spark. And it's having that, it's sort of building everything at the same time, but thinking about what are the pieces that need to be in place to do that. So yeah, Val and Julie, you've just arrived. So
Claire, I apologize for laughing, pardon me, as you were speaking. It was the black cat that walked across the screen. I just love it when cats come, and I already have had some airtime. So Julie, we're just introducing ourselves and speaking about what lights us up.
And how that might be something that can help give inspiration to the next steps.
I sense you want me to speak now.
Yes.
What lights me up? Having people cooperating and being excited about projects, that lights me up, and you guys are doing that.
Yeah. Val, you didn't really say much this time around. Is there something you'd like to?
Oh, I already talked a bit about the idea. For me, what lights me up is placing human beings as one species in a context of relations, and that life flows through humans and mushrooms and grizzly bears and black cats in exactly the same way. It complexifies when it suits its vitality, and it's just so interesting. And it is a signature of modernity that is not talked about. Placing humans in the context of relationship is not talked about. So I'm always really wary of adopting an old paradigm framework to try and expand a new, exciting, brilliant way of being together with all our relations. I'm very concerned about that. I love this. I think the place to start, Claire, like you said, exactly, is what lights us up, and not try and run too far ahead to see what the end goal is, because then we want to put the end goal first and devise strategies to get there. So I think this is just, the conversation is wonderful. I really enjoy it. Thanks to all of you.
And has Paul gone? I can't remember if he's gone, Paul.
Well, yes, I had earlier, and I'm a geologist, paleoclimate guy. And this is my first time I joined the group. I certainly in support of, I'm president of the Sound Water Stewards. We're marine focused, but I have a big picture view of all of it, basically. Geologists sort of think in a different time frame, basically, and but I'm still very concerned on the short-term scale we have here, and so I'm into sequestration. I'm into solutions for climate change, and that's non-carbon sourced energy of all kinds. And that might include nuclear, and that's also a controversial issue, but we need to sequester. I'm also on the board for Quimper Geological Society, and there's a talk there by geologist at the Geological Survey that talks about how they've captured CO2 and put it in basalt in eastern Washington. Biochar is another way, and it's a win-win for both agriculture and for the climate. For agriculture, in that it's an amendment to the soil. It helps retain moisture, and it helps to create the micro habitat for microbes, basically. But it also sequesters carbon for hundreds of years, and that's where it's a win for climate. So it's a win-win for climate as well as for the soil and farmers,
So-
getting away from needing the fertilizers, basically.
Yeah, thanks.
And-
Thanks. I wonder about focusing a lot on where, as we talked about, like most of us are pretty stretched. Where are the next steps in terms of how we surface what we're going to do next? Jan, I kind of caught you off guard a little bit when I started with you. I'm wondering if you had anything after hearing others that you wanted to bring in. But yeah, is there anything that's sort of bubbling up after people have shared? And really sort of thinking about what are next steps or things that are kind of emerging. It doesn't even have to be, you kind of need to take the intention and be able to put it into a direction of some kind. It's not a finished goal or anything. It's just like, what's the direction we're going to start walking in?
Well, I know specifically the sense of having assistance in setting up a communication system so that when I gather people, that there's not all coming through my inbox of email and then I'm the coordinator, but that there is this way that maybe we can have a web page each for the different groups that we're working with, and then fill that up, and then people knowing that there's something bigger that they're networked into, but also something very specific and individual that they can relate through. So I think that step is something that I'm seeing as being a potential. And what I'm feeling a little tricky about is that for some people, I mean, I can easily get into proselytizing and like going, whoa, come on here, like Regenerate Cascadia or something. But for other people, it's like, well, I don't know, what is that? And I don't want to be a turn off about that. So allowing people to come in from their own place at their own speed, and then seeing how that might relate to the larger, versus it being like, oh, there's this big thing going on, there's a bandwagon, you have to jump onto it. So I just need to work out how that flow works. And I'm assuming other communities are going to look at doing that too. So the learning process of how do we create a support for the kind of gathering, the quality of different conversations, the kind of events that we want to share, the learnings we might want to share from our own local groups, but also weave them into how we relate to each other, feels like a next step for me.
Yeah, I love that. And just to say, I mean, I'd love to see what others are saying, but just that's been a vision of Regenerate Cascadia, and something that certainly comes to mind as you said that was, what is it that will inspire others to feel that this is something worth, that has the capacity to do what's needed? But we need to be able to communicate that. And if we can't communicate that, they'll put their own interpretation on. So what is the story we want people to be inspired by of what we're doing?
And not have it be one more busy thing that they're being invited to join. So that sense of, well, what is it that lights you up? And is it something you're going to find in here that supports you to do what you're doing? So, I mean, that won't happen rapidly, but at the same time, first impressions really do make a difference. So if I say, hey, people, here's a website, we need to develop, well, what is there that would be the attractor kind of early on? Because people do make their decisions quite quickly because there's so much to look at these days.
Yeah, one quick thing that isn't to do with seeds, funnily enough. On Saturday, one of the things I want to do is attend the technology group. I've used all sorts of different technologies over the years, and Telegram's great for what it's been used for. But going forward, I think it's a bit awkward because when you get a long thread, it's hard to find where what you want is, you know. So I've been looking at this what's called a federated server system called Mastodon, which is very, very capable, and it's not a centralized authority type thing. It's each group running their own server, you know. So anyway, I'll be talking about that if I get the opportunity a little bit on Saturday.
Paul, you've got your hand up. You may have a few seconds.
Yeah, well, I just thinking here, how many nonprofits are in your county? In Island County, there are some 800 nonprofits. And we're all competing for similar resources in many ways. Some groups are all different kind of nonprofits, but I'd like to see us collaborate for funding and knowing each other, knowing our groups, because we just can't continue fragmenting in our own little specialties or subgroups, I should say. And anyway, everyone's coming back in the room, so I'll shut up.
Brandon, send us back to our room.
You were having a good conversation.
Yeah, well, I just nominate Brian to finish the statement that he started.
Yeah, and I'd love you to do that, Brian, and I'd love to hear back from both groups. So why did you finish what you were saying, and then maybe someone could give us a bit of a
there is a number of trains of thoughts going on, but it was like time. Anyway, we just to paraphrase, catch everyone else up, we were talking about how to get young people involved and what young people are looking at, and that is a really important dialogue that needs to come into the fold to see how we can extend our reach and carry all of this work forward. I guess I was just going to reply to Sam, who's kind of one of our younger representatives here, that, you know, I've been doing workshops for years here at Inspiration Farm. I have been doing all my own promotion for my own. I promote it through Transition Whatcom, other avenues. David McLeod's been really helpful in trying to get the word out, but it's really hard to get traction and hard to get people involved in it. And I spend most of my time doing promotion when I'd rather be spending my time doing teaching and on the ground stuff. Terry also knows she was involved in the Sailor Seed Guild, which is a nonprofit organization where we taught people how to grow and save seeds for climate adaptation and local resiliency. It was hard to get volunteers out to the volunteer days for these like really engaging conversations and hands in the dirt projects where we are doing meaningful work for the community. But as one of the founders of that, it was tough. I spent a lot of time just trying to get volunteers out to these things. So I think a huge service of the overarching group would be a clearinghouse for all these different events and to do the promotion for these different events so that the people wanting to offer these services could focus on preparing for the classes and offering the services and not spend their time on the computer doing the promotion. That being said, a lot of these things could be for free, but the people doing the work, it'd be nice to have some kind of compensation. The other thing is the classes that I do hold that I charge for, I try and keep the price really low, but it's, you know, and or I do it sliding scale. So it's trying to, but you know, maybe there's some, for the ones I really have to charge for, some scholarship fund for students that can't afford to do that or are dissuaded from doing it because of finances. All of my workshops that I try and do are hands in the dirt and doing practical projects. It's not theoretical stuff. It's actually doing work for the community, either in public spaces or for the public good. And so to value the people, not just myself, there's other people doing this kind of stuff. So to have a support structure for people doing that kind of work, and then make it fun. Like, to get people to do this work, it has to be fun and engaging. It has to be a party. Like we have to have a party to do this work. And it's, you know, it could be music, it could be food, it can be lively conversation. It can be going home with more than just the knowledge, but I got to pick a squash and take it home. So all these different things. The people doing the work on the ground need the support from the larger organization of communication, outreach, promotion, storytelling, all of these things.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Do you have more from your, Phoebe, I saw you had your hand up.
Well, thank you. And it's on this topic. And thank you, Brian, for saying that. We didn't have time to finish this topic in our group, but it's relevant to all of us. And I want us all to remember that the work that we are doing is creating a new economy and a new civilization. And that will help stabilize our planet and our climate and our societies in the times going forward, which are rapidly destabilizing. So those of you who know me will know that I often say, not only what kind of a society do we want from now on, but how are we going to get there from here? We may all want a gift economy, but we are all still stuck in systems that, you know, are making people go into debt and need to pay the bills and a mortgage and this and that. I don't think we have an alternative but to use some of the funds that have been spoken about to seed the people that can help us make it happen. And having an alternative society building up that is fun, that is a party, but is also able to help people pay the bills is absolutely crucial. So I think we need to be working on a 5 or 10-year plan that recognizes the reality of that cash economy and enables enough people to be adequately paid to do this work so that it becomes not only fun, but really attractive financially. At least it can help make people do it. Thanks, Claire.
Yes, Brad. So
I want to throw another angle in on the kind of the supporting people side of it. Over the last week or so, I've been involved with a couple other people and trying to help support somebody who's not involved with this, but is a weaver, is one of these kinds of people who I just met. You know, she put on a film that a lot of us came to and everything. And you know, she's been doing this stuff for, you know, volunteer for years and hasn't gotten compensated. And all of us, you know, recently the rug's kind of fallen out from under her. And so it's making me think about this and what a couple of us are telling her is, okay, let's reduce your expenses. So what I want to say is that, and she's interested in, you know, my kind of project and stuff too. If we can provide places where people can live with not needing so much money for exorbitant rents and having to drive their car, have cars to drive to jobs across town and then do this on the side or whatever people are doing. That's part of my vision for resilient communities I've had tremendous freedom for the last 25 years since I lost all my money. I had a successful business that I crashed and burned. I lost everything. And I just rearranged my life and used my resourcefulness that I used before to make money, to live resourcefully and reduce my costs. So in business, well, it's not just business. Ben Franklin, a penny saved is a penny earned. But not just reducing expenses, but if we can live together in small groups and support each other in little resilient communities, regenerating the land, regenerating each other without using an awful lot of money, we're going to be fed from within. And that's, even more important than money. Although if we don't have enough money to get by, that's hard to be fed. So anyway, I'm just trying to add some other angles to the question besides just the money angle, which is an important one too.
I just want to mention right here, like, I love this to be a little bit of a report back and also bringing in those things, but I'd like to bring in, has anyone heard about the 3 Horizons framework of thinking, which is, and it's sort of.
I'm reading about it right now in this book, Transformative Innovations. Thank you, Claire.
Excellent. Because what you were speaking to, and I just would love to just mention it because I think it's just very helpful to have in mind, is that there are, it's helpful if you see the graphs of it, but essentially there are, there's business as usual, which will take us, where it's taking us right now. There's the people who are wanting the change, but it can't, the conditions are not there to get us to where we need to. And so we need to bridge. Oh, you're showing us. Thank you. Yeah. So
is that one of them?
Yeah. Do you want to just hold it up there? The blue
okay,
line.
I'll keep it up there. Yeah.
Yeah. The blue line is sort of doing the things that need to bridge us to where we want to go. And I think that's what you were just speaking to, is it's the second horizon. It just, the conditions are not there to do what needs to take us to where we need to be. And then the third horizon is essentially putting the conditions in place that will actually take us to where we're wanting to go. And just being clear about where it is that we're putting our energy, because often we get stuck in that middle horizon, which is really not going to get us to where we need to go. And where we want to go is really the inspiration, is understanding what Phoebe was talking to. What is you had said it. Anyway, yeah.
Let me just no, hey Brad, so I appreciate that, and I think this is a great conversation, but I would like to pull us back a little bit. I mean, I think that's nice, but I would like to give an opportunity for the first group to kind of share back and report what they talked about, and then if there was anything else from the second group, from the Bellingham group, it would also be nice to hear from you as well.
I just wanted people to know that that's a backwards. You had to look at it right to left. That's all I was going to add to it, so for it to make sense. Done.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon.
So is there anybody from who can maybe summarize what was talked about? So I think a really important part of this, right, is that we are kind of starting to think about the structures and the things that are really important. We can't record in the breakouts. I think the main group was recorded, but I would really like to invite people to summarize from group 1, or maybe someone, and if Brian already summarized, that's really great. And then I would love to invite someone to summarize from the broader group or the Sailor Sea group as well.
Is group 1 Whatcom Skagit?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes.
I think David Ketter took notes on that.
David, would you like to provide a brief summary?
I would love to do that, but in my moving around from screen to screen, I've temporarily lost my notes. And let's see, anybody can chime in.
David McLeod mentioned how
Yeah,
important
please.
it is to set up a statement of purpose or a
Vision and mission.
kind of a common ground that we can all kind of agree on. So we talked briefly about maybe setting up a Google document with a framework that people can chime in on and edit. We talked about involving the youth, so I kind of touched on that. What else did we talk about, Terry, or anybody else that was there, Phoebe?
I think you mentioned the idea of like a clearinghouse or like a site or a location, whether that be physical or online, where people can find out about the opportunity. So there's kind of these hierarchy of we know what this organization's about or this group's about, the vision, mission, very high level. And then where do you find out about it? And then there'd be subsequent levels after that that get more on the ground and more regular.
Yeah, we talked about the network that we already have established, which is the Sustainable Bellingham, Transition Whatcom, which is under the 501c3 umbrella of Sustainable Bellingham, and Sailor's Seed is also under that same umbrella, and so is Whatcom Permaculture under that same umbrella. And so there's a network that's already established. So then identifying other groups and organizations in our area and how they fit into the overall vision, the mission statement or statement of purpose, however you want to phrase it, of Regenerate Cascadia in our water catchment. And then like communication structures, like how do we get the word out on various events, and how do we engage both the wisdom keepers, the storytellers, and the youth.
Great. Is there anybody from the Sailor's Sea group who would like to share what you talked about?
I'm Sailor Seed Group. Terry's also Sailor Seed Group.
Oh, no, sorry, not Seed. Sorry, the other group was
other group. Okay, good. There we go.
I'm happy to do it.
Sure.
Check back, but is anyone else?
No, go ahead, Claire. Thank you.
Well, it actually there's a lot of commonality that came up around the vision, was that there's a tension with the vision. You know, lots of sort of framing and I'm not going to represent that very well, but there was tension around sort of the visioning process and that, but at the same time recognition that we don't have a vision that inspires others about why this is something worth paying attention to, that it can actually be framed by others. So it needs to be something that inspires people, and that what you were talking about, Brian, about the clearinghouse, that it assists with the communication and the connecting people. Yeah, so facilitating the connection piece and communications, and a lot of what you spoke to there. And we talked a lot about the different projects, but there was sort of, I guess what was rising up was the need to be able to communicate and the networking piece. Yeah. Others, would you like to add in to what I shared that came up?
I heard Paul there touch on the end of exactly, I think, our mission statement of our hope with Regenerate Cascadia. But Paul, maybe you'd like to expand on that idea of also how do we weave? I think you were saying that Whidbey Island has 800 different nonprofits on it. So how do we work collectively and create vehicles where people can be working together to apply for funding and working together to share some of those resources, I think was something you had mentioned, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. For communication, I guess, too. I mean, it's just, we got so many groups. There's a new group on woodbeclimate.org, for example. And it's a very good group, but it's just another group, and they keep multiplying. We're all concerned, but we get oversaturated too. I don't know how to resolve that issue, but just a more comment than that I see as a growing problem. But the competing resources, I had the discussion with Lori Sherman 2 nights ago, because Fidalgo, Transition Fidalgo's had their challenges. Sun Water Stewards is having their challenges, and we're not as flush as some other nonprofits. And how do we work together? And there's a lot of overlap in many of them, in many cases anyway. So.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I think that that's true, Paul. I also know that if groups come together and go after money as a group of nonprofits, their chances of getting funding is better. And I think that's one of the challenges we've got in our area. So many organizations, each one fighting for their life, and it isn't being really resolved there. I think what is interesting along those lines is the work of Hillary Canty on Orcas Island, and her concepts about participatory grant writing. And what she has done, particularly during the COVID crisis, pulling together 30 nonprofits on Orcas on a weekly call, and through that, generating $2.5 million to help deal with that. And really, where all the various groups got the support and the funding that they needed to deal with that. But this is this is the collaboration that is needed. A second point was in our group, we did get into a conversation with Sam, particularly because the challenge is, and if you just look on the screen, you can see it, we need younger people engaged in this work. Younger people who really know about not only the challenges, but as they begin to take maybe some of the wisdom of what we've learned in all the years of struggle, you know, they may have a better way of going right now. And what is important is that they figure out what kind of message needs to be communicated to people their age who are very concerned about these challenges, but don't seem to be able to organize effectively around them. And I think that we need to listen more to Sam and his friends and get their ideas on where to go. I also believe that the other thing that we came up with in our group is storytelling and media is critical. The use of effective media to get these stories out, and most importantly, not just get them out, but invite people in. There needs to be a call to action to get involved in moving forward. That's the toughest challenge, and a lot of people in groups like this all over the world are struggling with that challenge. We need to figure out how to do it, and I think the stories in local communities of what's working really is a good way of bringing people in with a sense of inspiration.
I don't have anything to directly address what Larry was saying, but I guess I just want to kind of verbally process something that I'm thinking. Where my head is at and where my energy wants to go is helping to broaden the sphere of folks who are learning about this stuff or having these kinds of conversations, because I would gander that regenerative conversations at this level are still very much a fringe occurrence. And we want to engage a more mainstream audience to some capacity. Obviously, it's not going to go bonkers like all over social media or anything like that. It's not dopamine surging enough, but I can imagine that having a group that, like, I can imagine facilitating this, having a group of friends or a group of folks that meet once a week somewhere around town with a different subject matter, something about a project that's occurring within our bioregion or whatnot, or some kind of global, whatever level of system, something that's going on. Every once in a while, one of you folks who is engaging, who's actively doing some of this work, maybe on your land or something, comes and chats with folks. And then on like a monthly basis, that we would go out to, say, Terry's farm and see what she's doing, or go check out Inspiration Farm or something like that. And I think a huge part of this is regularity or consistency. So like, hey, it's Tuesday, I'm going to be here. I'll see you guys there. And so that I'm happy to be there and help to build that consistency and to bring people in. I wouldn't want to duplicate effort. So I know there is a Transition Bellingham that meets once a month. I don't know if there's another group that meets more frequently, or if Transition Walk meets consistently or frequently. I guess that I'm just kind of thinking on that, on the grounds level, how do I do something here? Because I'm relatively new to this conversation. I have a lot of energy that I want to put forward.
Great. Thank you, Sam. A quick question for you. Worked with youth a lot, and trying to bring youth in to something where there's a lot of old people around, so to speak, not always that exciting to them. I liked what you talked about, which was to, have, I think you were saying, a youth-oriented group, that meets on a regular basis, and then occasionally go out to projects and this and that. Do you feel that that's more effective to have a youth-focused group than to invite in to something like this?
I guess I was speaking to, if you say youth in the sense of mid 20s to 30s, that's what I'm thinking.
Compared to us.
Yeah, youth is relative, perhaps. Yeah, I'm thinking like this, people that I know, like meeting up at a brewery every so often, because that is super low barrier to entry and it's something that people already do. And if you want to get people on board with something new, you kind of have to play in their field, make it approachable. And so then you start to build that trust with these somewhat regular meetings, and there's like a sense of, oh yeah, I'll be there on Tuesday, you're going to be there, blah blah blah. And then that's when it becomes a little bit more palatable to go, hey, we're going to drive out to Rockport to look at a farm. Because if I just say that to one of my friends, that some friends might, yes, but the majority be like, well, I'm going mountain biking, so maybe not.
Yeah, hear you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Just on the, I think the intergenerational component, I just wanted to jump in and say, it's been interesting. I think Regenerate Cascadia, and I think especially reaching out through Joe, I think has reached a more mature audience. I think that also might speak to Zoom, in terms of who comes to Zoom conversations a lot and is there consistently. I will just say that I think when we actually start to talk about programming and doing stuff, we will have a very diverse audience, and that, yes, I think the best people to bring people in are members of a community. And I think thinking about it in terms of, there are many different communities, and this is a community of communities. And so meeting people in these niches where they are, rather than trying to draw them into a central space, I think will be very important. But in terms of the idea of this like youth core, what I will say is what we have in spades are educators, teachers, people who want to talk about place-based curriculum. And there's also a powerful opportunity to start talking about high school programs and bringing kids out. One of my favorite programs here is what is it? It's like the something Sawhorse Revolution, where they, because high school shop programs have been shut down, so they take kids out to permaculture projects and pea patches in the city, and they build things that they need, and then they build tree houses, and it's fun and it's young and it's there's just a lot of cool stuff there that can be done. So all that to say, I think that there's a lot of potential. So over to you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I totally agree, Sam. On that note, I started about 5 years ago a permaculture meetup, which is very informal. Go to different places, different people's houses, maybe have different projects, maybe have food, maybe not have food, but it only happens once a month. And I totally get that if it's more regular, then it becomes more of a rhythm for people. And I think that's really important to hear. The problem is like organizing it. And so like, if you're willing to take that on, I would say rah, rah, and I'll give you support and that kind of thing would be awesome. We try and do the permaculture meetup once a month, last Friday of the month. But even that, I can't always organize myself. And I try and get other people that want to host that want to help promote it, get it out there, to have that regularity to it. But I think that regularity is really important, and have a diverse array of topics. And again, to meet people where they're at, to, have this approachable and meet people where they're at, and then not trying to convert anybody, but anybody that is interested can join. It's like inclusive in that way. So yeah, that's I guess the main thing. We also had, and it was a project of Sustainable Bellingham, a roving garden party that happened. And that was also a once a month event, and you'd go and help somebody else out on their garden and have a big potluck and kind of a social gathering. And so those kind of events are really powerful for building community, because we need to regenerate culture as much as we need to regenerate the landscape.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Brian. Yeah, the culture piece is that needs to be a through line through absolutely everything, because it's the denigration of the culture that a lot of the destruction's been able to happen, and we know there's a correlation between the two. The thing I just wanted to bring up was just the thing that I think that makes bioregionalism different, and especially the way that Joe was actually able to help with the storytelling is that when we think about the land helping to organize the people, we can start to organize the projects and the work that's going on in terms of how we see the priorities of the land, and where we're needing to, like, how the lack of housing is actually problematic for the youth that are coming into the area to do the work that's like for around the stream restoration or the whatever, or the permaculture, whatever it is. But it's in focusing on the actual work that the actual landscape and what's needed in the landscape that we start to also look at carrying capacity of the land. And so all of the pieces that the various groups are doing, it becomes easier to sort of understand how the work fits together. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that back in again, because I think we can get a little bit, it can become a little overwhelming to figure out how all of the groups that are doing the work can be doing it. But when we think about the land actually being the place that helps to organize the work, it brings it back into kind of this very neutral ground, because we're all sharing that space. And so then it becomes a collective decision making that actually is unique to that place. And so when people often talk about scaling up their work and whatever, and they can do that, but if it's starting to take away from the relationship to the land and the culture that's being built there, that's being regenerated, then I think that can be kind of a red flag to really pay attention to what is it that we take inspiration from. So anyway, Brad.
So I want to reinforce and build on what Sam was talking about. it's inspiring to me to hear what Sam is saying, and it brings me back to a model that I had down back in Santa Barbara, which was where I lived for 10 years before I moved up to the Pacific Northwest 2.5 years ago. So I'm pretty new here. I had a project. It was an outgrowth of a project called Sweetwater Collaborative, which I helped start too, which was water, water oriented. And it was called Youth Drought Project. And we employed youth. So this gets to the, how do we support people? We employed youth doing landscape work that saved water. It was rudimentary to begin with. We were mostly just doing sheet mulching. I'm not going to go into the whole story here, but people love the idea of supporting youth and the drought. We had two issues that were important to people, so people were happy to hire us for their homes. We gradually added things we were doing, and before I left, we were getting into something even more related to the kind of things here. I was getting into like food forest, what I called food forest landscaping. I was getting articles in the local papers, starting to, I still have a demonstration site down there. And unfortunately that was ended by the pandemic. People didn't want a bunch of people coming over to their house. They were too scared. But the point of this example is I don't know much personally about raising funds, asking for donations and stuff, but mine was a nonprofit, but I only got one, grant the whole time, and it was one I didn't even seek. So if we can create new economic models, of instead of blow and glow, well, back down there it's called, mow, blow, and go, gardeners, and do a different kind of landscaping for people. And I think there's a lot more interest here, as despite how much Santa Barbara thinks it's like on the cutting edge of environmentalism. So I'm just throwing that out. And the other thing I want to say in relation to Sam is where it worked the best was when, because I, had a white beard, and the young people didn't always relate well with me. And when I had a young person that was a little older than the other people, who who could kind of lead them, it worked so much better. I had the best period I had was when I had a really good young guy who'd already had his, master's degree, and but was still pretty young, and they just really loved him and followed him, and I didn't have to, try to, anyway, just Sam, you're on the right track. And if you can, I'm not in your area, but if people can support and work with young people like Sam, who can take the leadership with the young people, and we can support and provide things, that's what I think we need. And if we can find ways to create an economic model that can employ them and pay them money, these weren't full-time jobs. They were first job for most of these kids, sometimes high school, sometimes college, but that age. Anyway, just throwing that out there, that we can come up with creative models to meet a lot of these things and fund it. And I got paid a little bit out of it too.
Well, I just want to put out there that I don't know how many of you others noticed the same phenomena, but it was a different cohort that showed up for the Joe Brewer public presentation than the ones that showed up for the farm activation tours. And that's been my experience in Transition Whatcom throughout, that, one group of people will show up to the public talks or a film. Another set of people will show up to some hands-on project. And then a third group of people will show up to something that's more what we would call heart and soul in the transition movement, the inner work and the inner questions and the relationship building stuff. So just, keep that in mind. We want to be as creative as possible and create as many different kinds of opportunities for people to come together and interact. But all of that requires people to organize and to promote. And so, yeah, I really hear the piece about having some kind of rhythm of regular meetings for people to come to. But those two take some energy and some people that are really committed to organizing them. And sometimes that's where the breakdowns happen.
I'm going to jump in on that, David. That I think you just made a really important point. And there's talks, there's hands-on, there's heart and soul work. And I would love us to also just think about function and purpose. And so I think it's really important early on that we have very limited capacity, we have limited scale, we have limited resources and funding. So what is the function of us having meetings? What is the function of us gathering together across landscapes or organizing? And then what's most important, because I think it's all really great, but we are going to have to also then figure out the priorities. So sorry, over to you, Larry.
You're muted,
Larry.
Thank you, Brandon. I have a question for the people up in Whatcom County. So far, I have not heard anything about Western Washington U's involvement in this. Where is their Sailor Sea Institute in all of these conversations? What's happening with Huxley and Fairhaven and all the other things that are happening there? You know, I think a key in a lot of the work that I've been doing in communities, really, and particularly the project that I was involved in Denver, which unfortunately didn't come together, really involved the universities, which brought in many of the young people who were working on all of these issues and the resources of those universities. Who is approaching UBC? Who is approaching UW? Western Washington University and other universities around the Sailor Sea ecoregion to get involved in bringing in their expertise. That is a huge piece that I think can contribute a lot of strength to what we're doing. Secondly, I noticed it's oh, excuse me, it's oh, he's already gone. The gentleman, Paul from Whidbey Island. You've got the Whidbey Island Institute. You've got some very powerful places on Whidbey. And of course, there's, for me living on San Juan Island, there's a real connection that I feel to people living like Sue on Vashon Island. I've got a number of friends who are down there. Whidbey, the San Juans, the Gulf Islands, you know, we're in a very unique position in the middle of this ecoregion, and we've got tremendous possibilities. So I would really like to see the island groups kind of entering into this conversation. The other thing is what I tried to do in 2003, which we did a lot of work until 2007 with navigating our future in the San Juans. The most successful thing, which I tried to recreate years later and just couldn't get the support to do it, was our conference in 2003. What we did prior to that to really generate a fairly large group of people getting together in October of 2003 was, first of all, we had a lot of stories about people who were moving on this regenerative path and what they were doing. So it was storytelling, usually in the newspapers in the area. Secondly, what we did was in August, we had the central exhibit on sustainability in the San Juans at the county fair. This generated tremendous interest, and that in fact led to, with stories that followed it, to a 2.5-day conference in Friday Harbor, where we brought people from all the islands together to participate in a deliberative dialogue of developing our vision in smaller groups, which we called pods, to eventually see how 13 of these groups, how there was a general melding of all of the visions that they had. We went out and developed group expertise about each of the challenges, from governance to food production to energy, you name it, housing, so forth and so on. And each one of the people who went out to these groups from each smaller group came back and were able to further help the group refine their vision. And it went on like that. And a lot of things came out of that, like the first change in county government for the first time in 116 years. Again, trying to keep that going without financial support eventually wore it down. I became, you become the flag holder carrying the flag. And at the point where all the people have dropped off, that's it. Well, we need to figure that out. But that's how you get the stories out in the community. That's how you get people engaged. So I envision something like that is necessary in each of the communities. It's got to start at the grassroots local level. And by the way, we had food, we all shared, we broke bread for 2.5 days. We had music, we had art, we had input from the kids in middle school and high school. It engaged the whole community in that process, and we made news. We made news. And that kept it going for a while. We couldn't get the funding piece together.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I think the funding is critical, and tying into what David is saying and others about somebody to do promotion and all of that kind of stuff is thankless work. And I've had that hat on for years. David's had that hat on. We don't get paid for it. We just do it because we know it needs to be done and nobody else is stepping up for it. And so and that is a pressure point that if that fails, everything else fails. And so that needs to be funded. Whoever's coordinating, whoever's, keeping track of the list, sending out the emails, doing the social media posts, doing the promo pieces, putting together posters, whatever it takes to advertise things, that needs to be funded and on top of the list. That being said, also tying into higher or any educational institution is key. And we've had the privilege to work with Fairhaven and Huxley, which is now the School of the Environment, and numerous professors up there, and very engaged students. We have 3 or 4 different tours here at Inspiration Farm throughout the year, from class sizes up to 30, 35 students this year. The problem is they're short term, they're only there for so long and then they move on. So getting them involved in a project is very short term. You get them up to speed on a project and then they're off doing something else. And so I've looked at that over the years, being involved in the Sailor Seed Guild. How do you get students involved in building databases and helping, distribute seeds and all this stuff? It still takes key coordination to work with those people, and in short times. I've been involved with students that do studies on soil carbon. We've done water filtration systems, and they check the water quality before and then after it moves through the systems. So short-term little studies, yes, you can definitely get students involved. And I have had a lot of students that have come on tours that then get involved on a deeper, more meaningful way, but it's 1 out of 100 will come and do an internship here or get involved. We also do permaculture in action every week here at Inspiration Farm, where we have whoever shows up, we're doing a project. And so we get students that come on that. But how do you get institutions to instill and give credit for volunteer work that are out in the community? You know, some other thing besides, oh, a student wants to do it. No, they want to get credit for it, or they want to get, you know, some kind of recognition, or it goes towards their thesis or their, you know, project they're working on overall. In fact, I have next week students that are coming out and they're wanting to interview me about how do you rebuild a better relationship with water in the landscape, and how does water relate with climate. So they're putting together not infomercials, infographics on that to simplify the explanation of how water is integrally related to climate. So, I mean, those relationships are there, but they need to be built upon and fostered.
Yeah, thanks, David. Something that's coming up for me is just to really sort of, it's so helpful to have these conversations, because it's sort of, some focus happens for me, but is I mean, Aquila Flowers and the Salish Sea Atlas that they're working on, trying to, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's where they've tried to aggregate the data collection between all of the different jurisdictions, because you can't actually look at a whole system coherently without aggregated data, and really sort of bringing that vision of a whole system and whole ecological system. And so building on that, so that's really important. But the thing that I have noticed is that when people have that level of expertise, if they're the ones that are driving it at the community level, often the community will, what it comes down to from my perspective is a lack of confidence in our own ability, and a lack of organization around what is it that we care about as a community. And typically we know about it in our conversations. We're just not organized enough to actually hold that inspiration and the vision of what it is that we're prioritizing for our area, what makes sense for us for our area. And then having a strong enough sense of that identity and the culture that is important to us, to be able to engage with those much more powerful and often entities that come in that are really important and useful information, useful tools and skill sets. But it's just, it can overwhelm what a community actually, like the community sense of itself, and how it's prioritizing the culture. So I just wanted to hold those things up there, and also to put in, you know, one of the ways that some of that's breaking down a little bit in places is in citizen science, in iNaturalist. That's like incredible data collection that's happening in those areas, like to bring those pieces together. So to me, where our power is in, you know, as we connect each other to each other, as we help each other to kind of streamline how it makes sense to connect. So, you know, even geographically starting to understand that we're coming together around certain parts of the landscape, that actually starts to give us a lot more power, if you put it that way, but so that we are taken seriously as the knowledge keepers for that area, and actually need to be treated respectfully, not just dismissed as not having the expertise from a university, or from like the things that have always, you know, basically, if you don't have the letters behind your name, you haven't been considered. That needs to shift. So anyway, I just wanted to really bring that up. David.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out there that early on with Transition Whatcom, we recruited a recent graduate from Western into our leadership team, and that was, I think, a really good move. We also supported a student from Western to start a campus group, like a campus transition group, and it looked really promising. However, like Brian said, there's a lot of turnover, so these students move on. So it's really hard to create real momentum that keeps going. And so it seems like the best approach is, I think Brian has modeled really well, is to build relationships with the professors and the programs. And then they can continue to connect you to the students coming through those programs. Also want to throw out there, the great example that Joe Brewer gives us with including his daughter Elise in so many things. Just, from day one, from the youngest children, to really figure out how to include them in this work, I think is hugely important, because they're the ones that are going to have to live through this transition. And I think that they're the ones that are going to be generating the really useful projects and ideas in the future.
Maybe we'll finish by 8.
I have no problem with ending early. No, but no, it's good conversation.
No, I love the idea that's in the chat about involving kids in mapping their bioregion. I think that is such a powerful interactive art project that people can really tangibly get connected to where the water comes from, where the wind comes from, where are the big trees, where does their food come from. That is awesome.
I also love, I think it was David who was talking about Joe's presentation, and I love how he frames intergenerational bioregional education, where it's like the kids get together and you provide, mentors with, elders can serve a mentorship role, but then the kids actually create the vision and create such cool ideas, and then the adults take them seriously. And I think that that's actually kind of a really interesting premise of what if we did these mapping workshops and future visioning, because like you said, they have to be the ones who live through it. But if they come to, I don't know, there's just, I think, a lot of really cool forms of engagement that we could really think about when it gets intergenerational. And then when we have the art products and the artifacts, from those things, they can be used to actually reach out with adults and with some of these more strict institutions, because I think it's actually very powerful. So that was all.
Yeah, the map is a tool of communication and action.
Larry, you're muted, Larry.
That's probably a good thing. This is a fabulous conversation. And by the way, I think that the engagement with youth is really critical. One of the things that I was very proud to be involved in back in 1996 was the formation of the Spring Street International School in Friday Harbor. And right from the beginning, we took our students out to be involved in experiential education, service learning, learning by doing. And we did this around, trips starting out in 8th grade around the country here, Washington first, and then eventually to Washington, D.C. and so forth, New York and so forth and so on. But then we went and started doing work in places like Thailand and Central America and India, and eventually going up to, the Tibetan group in Dharamsala with the Dalai Lama. And it was an amazing experience for these kids, and they were doing service learning, and they love to do that work. They really get into it. A friend of mine back in the 90s, when we were talking about the science of doing things and getting students involved, created with NASA the GLOBE program. And with the Globe program, youth all over the world, there were at one point 8,000 locations where the students were doing in that area scientific work guided by a world-renowned scientists, and these became collection points of information. So those kids were involved in doing real scientific work, and that went on for a number of years. So I think that type of experiential education is great. And I think that getting kids to begin in their own communities around this is great. And I think one important area to really focus on is the area of civics, which is no longer really taught in our schools. But the key is they can begin to learn about not only the rights of living in a democratic society, but also the responsibilities and how it works at the local level. Make it real instead of something that is off in the distance. Just those thoughts. And I think whoever made the point about aligning with the professors is absolutely critical, because then the students coming through should, and at least in our program, the Institute for Village Studies, which Western Washington eventually took over, it really was important for those students when they were doing their work on these trips to get college credit for doing it. That is really important. Anyhow, that's it.
Yeah, I was just gonna piggyback on that a little bit, and I'm not sure if Paul's organization is another example of this, but when I was down in Olympia talking with Peter Moulton, who's one of the original, kind of with Lansing and other people who really helped these early Cascadia bioregional congresses, he stayed in Olympia and they got really active, but he was a part of the creation of the Nisqually, I think, river or water keepers. And this idea of, and the way that they did it was by engaging the youth and using that as a community creation tool. And actually very similar, I think, to what Joe talks about, where they created, I think, 2 different activities. One was a partnership with high schools where they would go out and do citizen science to test water quality and learn about salmon and salmon restoration. And then they would like kind of map all the different water quality. They'd bring it all back. And then the other one was a partnership where I think they did a watershed festival, and they partnered with the Nisqually at the headwaters and would host it there, and then everybody would gather together. And I think those are still ongoing, but by bringing in the kids, you bring in the parents. And when you make it about place, it's not about politics. It's about, we want a clean river for kids. We want it for the fish. We want it, you want your kid to be able to swim in it. And I think that that's a really interesting discussion of, and it also helps us to shift the thinking of, rather than individual parcels, but into that watershed framework. So that experiential place-based education that can also shift us into the scale of landscapes, I think is really powerful stuff, and is a great way to create community as well as intergenerational, and also to break through the political barriers.
Actually, I would love to just add on that some of the people that I'm thinking of are not in the room right now to be able to bring in what you're talking to, Brandon, but is the people who are doing the sort of looking at, well, the bioregional learning and the mapping of what's actually going on in the landscapes. But it requires the people doing the work. Anyway, the power of the connecting just comes up over and over again, that each one that has that expertise in the system, once they start to see how to connect with the people doing the work. I mean, we're sort of this dedicated group, but there's so many people who are actually wanting us to be able to hold these relationships. And so, yeah, I sort of was realizing we hadn't actually mentioned that, but it's once we start to organize so that we're findable and coordinated, that becomes really important. So.
Yeah, I think that that's really important, Claire, is the idea that we're also helping to bring voices forward that might not otherwise be visible. And more importantly, just to us, we're making those voices visible to other people in their landscape and across watersheds, throughout the bioregion. And I think that's really important, because I think that's come up over and over again. People are so busy, they're not resourced. And I mean, even down to Celilo Falls, where we started the trip, that was Lana Jack. He was, it was like bearing witness to Celilo Falls and then being able to carry that story with us as we traveled. And so again, it's weaving in the storytelling and showing and just how important that is.
And I am seeing that people are having to leave, and I'm thinking that it's looking like, thank you so much, Brandon, for bringing that up. But I think everyone's starting to kind of fade. It's been a lot. And hopefully we'll see a lot of you on Saturday. So otherwise the recordings will be there.
I had one question, Brandon and Claire. And I think I communicated this to Brandon, I will not be able to make it on Saturday. But I'm really interested in what goes on there. And what is planned for Sunday? Or are there plans for Sunday? No. Okay.
I think Claire and I have made an executive decision. I think that we're just going to cap it on Saturday one day. It's just going to be 10 to 5, nothing in the evening, nothing else. I think with respect to, I think honestly, actually, I think Sue said it best, that we need to have a little window of digestion. We have a lot to digest. We've been eating a lot. And as much as I love eating, I have to digest at some point, apparently. But
yeah.
We won't continue that conversation where it goes, right? But
I would like to say.
Well, then we enter into the realm of permaculture. It's okay.
Yeah,
but
how do I get in touch with you all later? I can't make it Saturday either, but I'd like to get in touch.
Yeah.
So I sent my email in the chat, but
yeah, so we will be
Larry, for example, I'd like to continue the conversation and so forth. So I mean, about grant writing, for example.
So
yeah.
You go ahead, Brandon.
No, go for it.
We will be, we don't know exactly the form that it will take, but there will be some form of regularly hosting something where it's actually aligns with something that feels like it's time well spent for people. And so I think that will be communicated shortly, but we really need to digest, take back and figure out some things to bring back to people. But regularly convening people in a way that feels streamlined and helpful. And Brandon's had a whole bunch of ideas around that too. I don't know if you want to speak to some of them, but
sure. Well, so it's ideas like bioregional updates that are being reported. The Lauren Minnis thing, I think we might start doing a Cascadia regeneration pollination, which is that more networking, meeting each other. Before this started, we really like the idea of campfires where we can be meeting and just more discussing, talking about challenges where we're at. In terms of outreach that Claire and I will start doing, we will be just starting to do a lot of one-on-one follow-ups with individuals, but also groups who helped host activities and who want to carry it forward, making sure that they have the information they need. We are going to start conversations about starting to get up a few place-based websites, and I think identifying teams. I think Whatcom, Skagit, San Juan's, there are Victoria, there are a few examples of Portland, Eugene. There are a few good examples of, I think, people where we can work and really let it emerge the needs, and we can work together to really craft it. In terms of how to get a hold of us, definitely email is good, but if you can, the Telegram group is best. Otherwise, if you sign up on the actual regeneratecascadia.org page, either for newsletter updates or sign up, you can add your organization to the map. And I am, as it was said, beavering the website every few days right now. And so part of the digesting will actually be getting the website into a I'm going to have like kind of an archival material for all of this process up through the summit and everything. We'll get it static, but then we'll really start to shift it towards being functional for what's coming next. Because it would be great to keep. And in terms of, I think what you're talking about with grant writing, I think a big focus too will also start to be like the people who came to this summit and who went through this process. We will be using this as well to identify probably people who will help us with as a stewardship team. And that can be things like I think Larry also talks a lot about bioregional media, and communications and fundraising is going to be a huge component. How do we get people resourced, and how do we get the work resourced? So
yeah, and then the networking platform.
Networking. In terms of the networking platform, yeah, so you all have already spoken to it, the clearinghouse. That I think is one of the biggest components for communication events. I mean, down to the needs and offers, down to the, I honestly think like a communiversity style where we have so many experts. So information house, also resources that we want to share. And then I think Claire and I have also been talking about training the trainer stuff. So what do we want Regenerate Cascadia to bring into the community, whether it's community art, mapping, mapping, helping new groups start, the scaffolding, the administrative backend, I actually think is going to be huge, whether it's marketing, whether it's providing help with administration and tax stuff, or connecting or fundraising or raising awareness. I think like that Weaver role, what Brian talked about of like, the newsletters, and helping get people out to events. I also think the big thing that has emerged is the learning across scales. So I think this idea of taking people, and it doesn't actually have to be from one place to another, but Vashon could host an activity in February where people come and we actually put people up, and then Gabriola could host people in March, and they could actually people come and host, and then Watcom could host people in April, and it's kind of like a little mini activation tour, but we invite other people who are doing this to come and learn, and really what we're doing is we're deepening personal relationships and connections. And I think that's like the most important, is that we're not working as organizations but as people, and we are building community and authenticity.
There was a big piece, one other big piece about that is the funding, working cooperatively with funding, and actually practicing how do we prioritize and then distribute, basically that's governance, local governance, and how do we work together cooperatively to distribute the funding. And there's lots of models going on right now, and really we'd love to have local communities have smaller amounts of money potentially that hopefully we will be able to bring in for the landscape, to be able to share with local watersheds to start so that the projects that really need to be supported can actually have some funding coming to them in a way that makes sense for each watershed, and that to help to drive the governance.
And along with that, I mean, that is a conversation that we've been having in the background of each place, and that we are continuing to have, is this idea of a regeneration fund. And that's not just huge random big groups of money coming in, but also maybe it starts smaller with donations or membership thing, but really allocating that out, supporting the watersheds, or weaving teams in each watershed. But also it's that idea I think Paul touched on, which is also when groups can come together, we can create vehicles where they can just work together to apply for their own grants. They can also be vehicles where they could apply for 0% interest loans, or we could connect people with large donors to projects that match around interests. And so I think that there's a lot of alternative funding mechanisms that we could be exploring. Lyon in East Jefferson County is like a really great example of that with Finn River. They've done and that came out of, I think, Sustainable Port Townsend, or I'm gonna get it wrong, but just some
2020, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Port Townsend 2020. They have done some crazy cool stuff, and that again is part of. So for us, we need to document this. We need to share out some of our findings, and then we need to identify people that we want to work with moving forward that can help us really grow this. And sorry, I know Brad, you've had your hand up for a long time. Paul, you've had your hand up. So Brad, maybe over to you for a minute, and then Paul.
Yeah, mine's just quick. In responding to what Paul had brought up. And I did hear the word come in there, but and we've had conversation, one of our breakouts, Brandon, on like a platform. And I still haven't had the time to look into high-low as much as I'd like, but I see multiple projects that I'm involved with where that or something like it. I didn't like Mastodon so much when I looked at it, but anyway, with the right platform, I think we can do a lot of self-organization and not put so much weight on the organizers. So that's all I want to say is I think I presume we're going to do some sort of platform where we can self-organize and connect with each other, Paul, because I want to connect with a lot of you and a lot more.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to make a plug that I put in chat for our public event, Saturday, February 3rd, to have an exhibitor table, be among like-minded organizations there, to network, and of course, see what you want to see as a for the in-person presentations. There'll be a keynote. We don't have the theme developed yet, embarrassingly, but we're working on it. But anyway, keep it in mind, and love to keep in touch. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Good night.
Okay, good night.
Thanks,
Brandon.
Thanks
to all of you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for that, Paul. And I'll save the chat here.